Welcome to Socialcast, your go-to place to learn about marketing, the latest social media news, and insights. Brought to you by Social Bakers.
On this episode that we recorded live on Facebook and LinkedIn, we sat down with Omri, our SVP of Marketing, to talk about paid social media. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're at the Social Bakers Studios, and you may be joining us from many different places. LinkedIn one, Facebook, and on our new podcast, the Social Bakers Cast. So thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. I'm here in the studio with Omri, our SVP of Marketing.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Amantis. I head up the content team here. And today we're going to talk about something that's probably more critical than anything else, which is paid advertising, paid social media.
Yeah.
Omri, you've been doing it for many years.
Yeah, I have.
Right? So, not bored yet?
How can you be bored with paid social media and paid in general? It's been changing so much every year. One of the most important areas, most scalable areas, and most exciting areas because you're dealing with big spend and a lot of action in the field. So, yeah.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to ask questions. This is the time to get your most difficult questions about ads answered. Just to give a bit of context, in today's video or podcast, we're not going to be diving into like the nitty-gritty detail of Facebook ads management, but we're going to look a bit more about the processes, about the wider strategy, about team alignment. So if you are someone or you have someone in your organization who's sitting in that area, share the video with them, your CMO, the VPs of the areas. I think it will be really valuable for them.
Yeah, today we're going to discuss more on the overview level, what's important for your strategy, the challenges that we're seeing in paid in different companies that we communicate with, the importance of data, and dive in there. We'll have another podcast to talk more about the nitty-gritty and have our wonderful campaign managers, but this is more on the overview and how to perform the correct strategy so you can really own your results eventually.
Okay, well, let's just dive in. So I think the first question for me, and maybe if we look at digital marketing today, what are the sort of the key real challenges for the paid area?
So I think the biggest challenge, and has been like that for a long time, has been the data challenge. Mm-hmm. Understanding within the darkness of the internet what's going on with what you're doing. What's the direct correlation between your ads to conversions, to the user journey, and so on. It's getting better. It's improving. We're seeing much more software, but still that's a big challenge, especially for the bigger brands with big branches of advertising, which are used many times agencies to advertise around the world. But we're talking about thousands of different campaigns, thousands of different budgets and allocations and hundreds of territories often. How do you make sense of all of this? And how do you make sure you can actually see the right input and the right output for your efforts? The beautiful thing about online advertising, unlike the past, is that you're actually privy to direct response. You can actually see what's going on in every section, unlike usually a TV advertisement, which you would pay, you would show, and then you would see an effect, but not such a direct effect that is controllable and scalable. So I think data, very big challenge for people. I think the constant changes in the systems is another thing that's very challenging. What works this year on AdWords or LinkedIn or Facebook might not work the next year. Shifts in privacy, shifts in needs. More advertisers focusing on the more popular outlets. For example, if stories used to be the place you can advertise very cheap because people aren't, the total market hasn't discovered it yet. Now there's more people there's more people bidding, and prices are going up. So there's a challenge of how do you get better results? How do you optimize and improve them? That's also a huge challenge I've been seeing. And I would say those are the two main ones, but there's always more things coming. Also, like I said, that's a big point too, the privacy area. We are seeing more and more the platforms going towards hiding more user data, disallowing cookies, for instance, for retargeting, a huge tool used that was very successful for many years. It's starting to show signs of fading. So it's a lot about how do you adjust while you need to prove results, you need to continue to improve while everything keeps changing on you. So it's an interesting challenge to see that.
Well, if we maybe come back to the challenge of data, I think the one thing that everyone keeps talking about is the consistency of data, and it's really tricky to do, especially when you're advertising on multiple platforms. You're working, like you said, with different agencies. And what are some of the solutions to make your data more consistent? Is it possible?
Well, first of all, I think I've been seeing more and more organizations even wake up to the fact that you need to track data. And I'm still often surprised when I meet CMOs, sometimes in large organizations, where still there's no tracking. Right. So they're spending money, they sometimes in insane budgets, right, but no one's really aware of the effect it's having. There's assumptions, but assumptions don't allow for success. So I would urge any organization to start looking at the different entrance points and putting the right technology to even measure the user journey and the customer journey. Of course, depending what you're selling, if you're e-commerce, take your user journey. That way, if you're a beauty brand, it's a bit of a different funnel in what you're trying to achieve. So first of all, also define what success is. What do you need to measure? Start building that ecosystem so a few months from now you can actually have data that you can build and improve on. And there's many tools right now out there, including social bakers, that do that for you, that you don't need to invest so much in figuring it out, but you have systems that can tell you the whole story, different analytics tools, and so on. It's so critical and it's so obvious once you have that, how much it's important, but it's weird, I gotta say, that not every organization is pushing into that digital adoption area where really tracking every section of the funnel to understand what's going on. Yeah,
that's the scary thing. As soon as you realize how much money you're probably losing, it becomes very scary,
There's a saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. And it makes sense. Where are you going if you don't know where you're at? So yeah, very critical. The days are over of classic marketing. I'm going to just put few $1 million into a production, show it on TV. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's a different digital world, which allows for much better cost efficiency. And the companies that understand that and a lot of times it's startups, because startups have very limited budgets, and they need to provide the highest return versus the budget that they have, and grow at the same time at huge rates. So we know that, for instance. So everything is checked and everything is tracked, and that really allows us to identify where we need to improve. And sometimes it's not the obvious opinion. There's so many opinions, but data doesn't have emotions. It just shows data, if it's the right data. Of course. Which is also very important.
Yeah, and that's a whole different challenge is making sure that everyone is looking at the same data across the business. And if you have like regional teams that they're looking at, it's a nightmare.
Now, working with agencies is wonderful, and I think it's a great tool. Building an internal acquisition team, especially if you're on a global front, is not something you can do very easily necessarily. So working with agencies is fine, but the important thing is, do you own your data? Do you understand what you're paying for? What ads are been showing? I'm not talking about a small campaign level where you're optimizing CTRs and you're optimizing by small funnels. I'm talking about your big overview, what's going on right now. And that's critical. And if you miss that, you're missing you're just putting money on the table. And you're not able also to prove your results, by the way, which is also something interesting that I see a lot of times. It's kind of this limbo where we don't know.
Yeah, and that's if you're sort of working on the agency side, one thing that you're probably dealing with currently is this maybe a bit of lack of trust, the need to build more transparency and that ads data measurement. I think the times are over when the agencies really wanted to keep the data to themselves. But I think there's little to gain from that. And
Yeah, if you can walk the walk, there's no reason that you shouldn't be transparent on your data.
Exactly.
Same way we do it here. Everything's on the table. These are the results. First of all, that makes sure that you improve the results when they're not high, but also it shows for real confidence. So I think for an agency, it's actually a good thing when they're willing to. It's kind of like restaurants with transparent kitchens. You know what I mean? They got to keep their game up because you can see what they're doing. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. That is a good tip. We'll learn from the food industry. Yeah. May we answer one question from the audience?
Yeah, sure.
I think it'd be nice. Fatima, thanks for joining us, I think, on Facebook. Her question. I tend to see a taste of boring professionalism where everyone is trying to top on being tactical and strategic. Where is the creative part when we follow almost a common strategy?
Oh, I love that question. It's a great question because I think I spoke about it yesterday in our episode. I've been seeing more and more the tone of numbers bash creativity.
Right.
If you're too much about optimization and numbers. First of all, I absolutely disagree. Creativity is creativity, even when it comes to programming, which is about code, and a lot of it is math. People are creative. So you can be creative in any form. The interesting thing, though, is there are areas which allow for better creativity, maybe because your focus is not on the bottom line and results. And also, if the fact was that we could, only by looking at something or being inspired, understand if it would be good or not, that would be another thing. But you know this as well as I do, that you can do something you think is amazing and you've just invested a month and it doesn't work. While sometimes you do something in 5 minutes, very low tech, but that worked. So one was more creative, maybe one allowed for more room, but it didn't work. But again, I think every territory has a confines in which you work in, and if you choose to do paid advertising, for instance, and that's a realm where length of text matters, where you need to get their attention fast, so there's rules of copywriting many times that assist you. There's a lot of room for creativity. I challenge anyone to write ads for AdWords, where you need to fit your whole message into a small box. You got to get very creative. So I understand that sometimes it feels as if it limits freedom, but I think it can just augment it. It's just a way to know if what you're doing actually works, and then you can build on it. So I've never seen it as something that I think that a well-functioning marketing department that measures its results will usually also be very creative. I've never seen a non-creative marketing department that succeeds based only upon their ability to put numbers. Yeah. Especially in a world where it's getting more about value and less about how do you trick the system to get you through. So.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, I think. Encourage more questions from the audience. We'd be happy to answer at any point. But moving to maybe a slightly different topic. So in your career, you've built many successful paid machines. And what kind of goes into it when you're looking at it from a team perspective as well? What advice can you give? So first of all, make sure that if you're building a paid machine, you know you've done paid, or do it a bit. I mean, get an understanding of what it means to actually do it, because it's very, very critical. It's like the difference between doing a doctorate about honey versus tasting honey. Right. There's just things you learn in the field that allow you later to provide the right feedback for the team. So that's the first element. Make sure that you know what you're talking about. And that's also basics of psychology, of how to write a message, how design works in these platforms. Again, gain the experience, or find someone that has that experience that you can delegate it to. But don't live inside that wonky realm where you need to prove that you know something that you don't know how to do, and so on. Very critical when building acquisition, paid. It's huge amounts of money usually going at a very fast speed. So the more you spend, the more the holes in the bucket appear. Okay, so it's very important from the beginning, if you're building it, to have the right tracking, like I spoke about,
that you know every intersection of your funnel. So if you're a B2B like us, for instance, then you have a long sales cycle you need to have the right leading indicators along the way, understand the ratios, the transitions in the funnel, so that you can predict how many deals you will get from your efforts right now. If it's a shorter sales funnel, then you need to understand your intersections within the advertising. Usually it will be smaller deals, so you need better click-through rates. So again, everything about tracking. If you don't know how to do it yourself, get a technical person to assist you in building that system. Because again, once you start spending and seeing success and growing, mistakes cost more later, right? So once you got that set, it depends on the stage in which you are. The more in the beginning, you would want people that are able to do multi-platforms. Or again, there's always the agency front, but I'm talking more from the in-house marketing, which is a big trend right now, and I think it's very good because it allows you to have people that are dedicated to the company, who are professionals in their field of advertising and doing a very good job. So in the beginning, you need the people that are able to do multi-platform, which later, if you grow a team and you have a few campaign managers, you can have them be proficient on 1 or 2 platforms only and focus in that realm and build it. Very important is to create the right KPIs for measurement and to agree on them and understand the stage in which you are in. If you're in the stage of innovation, then it's a stage of testing. That means small tests, a lot of small tests, trying to understand what works. You find what works, you invest more there. I'm throwing a lot inside.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
But there's also optimization stages in which you have already a functioning system, but now you want to see how do you get more for what you're spending already. So it really kind of depends on the stage it is. It's a very broad answer. But get the tracking right and learn psychology of marketing together, and then you kind of get this good synergy, and usually the results follow. Right. From what I've seen.
Well, what if you're now in the stage, okay, so you built these individual teams. There's a Google Ads team, there's a Facebook team, there's maybe someone focusing on Instagram. So what's your routine like? How do you make sure that these things are actually bringing in results? Yeah,
so from the place let's say the place I sit, which is the place that is more about governing the data itself. So I don't run specifically campaigns right now. I manage the people that run campaigns at this point. For me, the overview picture of sitting in the morning, going over the data and looking at what our goals are and how we broke them down daily to see if we're approaching the right direction using our different leading indicators. So every morning I see and I just check that the checks and balances are in place, that we're achieving the points in which we want. And of course, if we see areas that are lacking, we know that this is where we need to focus right now to improve the results and keep pushing the areas that are. I always say invest more in the 20% that are bringing you 80% of the results and remove the 20% below. And that's kind of the methodology we keep working on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and of course quarterly basis when we look at it in a more holistic view. Then of course the manager of acquisition, the head of acquisition can focus the different teams because he's sitting on more the platform levels in which he says, okay, so this is our paid results. So for instance, I look at paid, organic, events, and the different avenues in which we're getting our inbound lead generation. And the head of acquisition would be focused, of course, on his paid area. And we constantly use signals. And I think that's the message I keep repeating every time I go on these lives or anything. If you don't have signals to tell you if you're doing well or not, and if you're not tracking the whole funnel, as much as it can be a headache and as much as the data can be scattered, if you're not doing that, something money is getting lost along the way, results are lower, and the more you invest in, the bigger the holes will be. So again, it's all about focus, isolation, and improving. Always look also for where the biggest drops are or areas. So if you're running multi-country, and again, depends on the level of overview that you want to look at. While assuming that the person, the VP digital or CMO in large companies are many, many levels away from campaign managers, while in startups they're maybe a bit closer. So it really depends on the level on which you need the view, but you need to set the parameters in which you're tracking and understanding that level. So even if it's on a global level, how's this territory panning versus this territory versus your investment? Are you getting what you need? And then, again, everything becomes simpler because you understand where to invest.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit earlier about setting goals. Any advice there to set the right goals for your advertising?
Well, it really depends what you're trying to achieve. I would always take the end goal you're trying to achieve and start reverse engineering backwards with the signals that you need to get there. And then you can, so just as an example, I'll take it again more from B2B because it's longer sales, so it explains it a bit, sometimes a bit better. But from the investment versus your closed deals, you have many different intersections in which the marketing and business pipeline and what we call the funnel go down. So for instance, you're doing lead generation, then you have lead scoring that will tell, so you're doing lead generation on all the platforms, you're tracking that. You know the different ratios you're getting from paid, so it's Facebook, LinkedIn, so on, and you know this is performing like this. Then you have another intersection, it's the lead scoring, so you're losing a certain amount of leads, and the costs are going up per that scored lead. So you mark that, and you know the costs for that. Then you go further down the funnel. How much does it cost for a business development representative to get someone on the phone and schedule a call for a salesperson? And you start breaking down these intersections and see what happens when you invest. Just throwing $100, what's the output that you get? And then look where you're losing the most, and then you have a bit of an understanding where you need to invest your time. The marketing sector is an area with many ebbs and flows where you can optimize. It's the scoring that you give for the quality. It's the campaigns you do. It's later the speed in which the leads go in. There's many factors, but you can signal and start seeing, because it will usually be one area that's where you kind of need to focus right now to elevate it up, and then you open the clog and the rest goes down. If it's on the marketing side, if you're not getting enough leads, then you need to work on your campaigns, get the right cost per lead, get everything there. If you're bringing in good cost, the quality is there, but later hardly turn into opportunities. Maybe you need to focus further down the funnel, understand what's getting lost in the process, you'll discover. But this is all data, and this is everything you need to look. If you're just expecting to put in and put out, it's not going to work. And it's like magic when it happens, because it's as if you unclog things. So that's my approach to what's called funnel optimization, especially in paid, where again, it's so critical. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be tracking organic. It just means when it comes to paid, the losses can be high if you don't.
And would you say that it's the same sort of goal for a B2C business to close those funnels, being able to start from the...
Oh, for sure, because first of all, B2B and B2C, depending on the type of funnel and sales and so on, but even in e-commerce, when you're selling online, you have those different intersections. You're paying this amount of money to get someone to view your ad. Then you're paying this amount of money for them to click it, and then a percentage out of that, buy it. And then a percentage out of that, go and buy again. And each one of these, if in isolation, you can figure out how to improve. Now, and the beautiful thing is, because if you just invest more money and you don't improve the ratios, then you'll have to double your spend to get double results. But if you improve, the more you improve the ratios towards the sale itself, the more you'll get for your investment. So it's well worth doing both processes at the same time.
Yeah, so, one thing that I'm taking away from this, that you really have to be a bit of a data wizard today to manage the paid area.
Not at all. I was never good in math. I don't know how I even got, but
That's encouraging then, yeah.
No, because you have, again, this is not rocket science. This is just, first of all, investing the energy and time to actually see what's going on. We're talking about amounts and ratios eventually, amounts and ratios. There's software that does it for you these days. It just tells you the story. Right. What you later do to improve it, that's maybe what the skills are at.
Maybe if I rephrase my question, so if maybe I'm working in a big business and I'm sitting on top of the marketing department, and I've been running ads on TV or whatever, and I want to go into paid, and it may sound scary, but what you're saying is that actually it can be pretty simple.
It's much. Again, it depends on the system and how much legacy. If you have a huge spending machine on paid, then and you don't have tracking anywhere and you've never done it, it might take a bit of investment. You need technical people to do that. If you have a huge paid structure, you probably have the money to invest in getting that technology in. If you're just getting started, if you're small, it's easier because, again, it's now the time to implement it. But when you're small, you don't have, by the way, usually the budgets to invest in those software, that overall all-in-one software. So there's a solution to every stage depending on where the company is in digital adoption. But TV is still a wonderful outlet for huge brands, but statistics show it is declining.
Yeah.
And if it's declining, and it makes sense because many of us have just watch shows on our computers or smart TVs, so it's changing. The landscape is changing. And I think it's actually for brands because it allows them, again, the spend here, you understand what you're spending your money on, which is very critical because in TV, oftentimes you don't know. Or it's very hard to optimize it or be very direct because you see the response later. Here it's very fast. You invest, you see, and this allows you for testing also, different things, very fast to see if concepts work. So again, I think B2B was maybe the slowest in adoption on this, and even that is going there already. B2B, large organizations, it's wonderful to see it. It's a good evolution.
And so another question for you. So what do you see that are the common mistakes that maybe CMOs or VPs that are on top of this area make?
I think a lot of times it's focusing on the wrong thing, expecting certain results. I think there's a lot of need to understand the difference when you're doing awareness campaigns, when your goal is to create brand recognition within people, versus a performance marketing where you need to show results direct results per what you're doing, return on investment. And we're seeing more and more a shift into sales-based companies that focus through online and inside sales and inbound funnels in which you're selling, and it's a machine. And you need to understand which metrics matter to you. It's as if, for instance, I'd have an ad on Facebook running, and I come and get excited because it got a huge amount of likes. But no one ever clicked, or no one ever got to the other side. And I see a lot of that going on. We have the data, but we're not aiming for the right thing. A good example for that is cost per lead and cost per click versus cost per result. Right. So often the costs the CTRs can be amazing, the cost per lead can be amazing, but the cost per result is huge because it's not even the right people to buy. So if you would be optimizing by the cost per result in the end and have the right way to view it, so understand your objectives. What are you trying to aim to? If it's awareness, it's awareness. It's a different ball game. You're expecting different results. Your indicators and signals are different. If you're doing demand gen, it's different. If you're doing retention marketing, it's different. It really depends on if you're doing e-commerce sales, then you care about sales, not about cost per lead, for instance. So define your objectives correctly and always keep them in mind and don't fluff the rest of it to show. There's too many vanity metrics going around out there. And sometimes, by the way, engagement likes are what you're aiming for, are what would bring you the rest of the traffic will cause people to notice your brand. So when you get them into the sales process, they have this recollection of, oh, I saw, there's a lot of companies that I see that their lead generation is causing awareness because there's brands I only know because they do Facebook advertising and it gets such a huge reach. So I've never put a lead there. I've never inserted my name there. But I have such a good recollection of this company that if I meet a salesperson somewhere, oh yeah, you're from that company. Yeah, for sure. And because, for instance, I don't watch TV. So specifically, I get it from there. So yeah, that was.
Yeah, I think that's just more and more people, I suppose. Yeah, so it's.
So that's the biggest confusion I see. There's a lot of talk about attribution as well. That's confusing everyone. How do I attribute? And what's the best methodology? Very big challenge. And the biggest one is we're spending and not seeing results. It's also And
that is the biggest problem.
And that oftentimes comes just from a misunderstanding of your market, which, by the way, again, who's your audience? Who are these people? There's a whole side beyond the technical that is about the psychology, creativity, and understanding who your audience actually is, for instance. That's why we in our software have these sections. You know, we have the paid, we have the content section, and we have who's your audience? Yeah. Actually, not who you think they are, but who are your audience? What do they digest? And how do you create, and what content do they care about? And that allows you to kind of, oh, okay, that's not what I thought. This is what the people want and need. And then you start catering more to them instead of the image you think that they should be. Yeah.
Yeah, so earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that it is just changing so quickly. And that's sometimes another challenge that is really difficult to keep up with it. Where do you see it all going? So let's say if a CMO who needs to plan for the next year, what should they be expecting?
First of all, if you've done marketing long enough, you understand that every year was this doom. It's the end of SEO, it's the end of pay. I've been hearing it every year. And it always seems to pan out for the best. So no panic. It's just kind of this, human thing to do. And also it creates news. You're being marketed a problem here, okay? Now, I think actually the systems are becoming more intuitive. If you see Facebook advertising today versus Facebook advertising in 2013, you had to duplicate your ads every 3 days or it would start falling in rank. You don't need to do that anymore, or at least not every 3 days. Same thing was on Twitter advertising. Let's not talk about where LinkedIn was back then and versus where they are now, which is amazing on the platform. AdWords 5-7 years ago. So the capabilities are growing. YouTube, amazing what they did with the platform. So it's improving. I think for the more growth hackers style, like Black Hat or those styles that try to kind of trick systems, it's becoming maybe harder. So it's more, you actually need to invest in value and finding real messages. Same thing SEO kind of went through. SEO used to be a playground, and then there was this period where Google was filled with like junk, and they cleaned it up. So it's in the right direction, and I think privacy, as much as it's a challenge for marketers, is an amazing thing. Eventually, we need to standardize things so people's privacy is kept. So there'll be new mechanisms that allow us to understand it more. It's gotten so much better. If you from the early days, I was using Google Analytics in its basic form, and you'd get this information. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's just getting better, and it's just we're going to see even more and more people, players, and entering this realm, and might make it more expensive, but also it's causing more platforms to open. So, and that's exciting because it allows, I don't believe in putting your eggs in one basket, never like invest in one place. And the more the playground's bigger, the more the merrier. And you see more and more social media kind of platforms emerging and catching on, and Amazon ads and Reddit. And so there's a lot of options that are starting. So there'll be challenges, they'll change. Keep your ear to the ground. Don't think that if you like, I for 1 year didn't look at SEO much, and so much changed that these days I look every month, just to see that I'm still up to date. And just as a CMO, keep up to date, because you can become obsolete very fast if you don't do that.
And I suppose the future looks very scary if you don't know what the hell's happening in your marketing department, where the results coming from, and like what you said throughout this talk is like, if you don't have an understanding, if you don't have the data, then it all looks scary.
Yeah, because it's darkness. That's all. Like, it's not a shop. You own a shop on your street, and you see the people coming in, and you understand what's going on. The online is kind of this dark place, and if you don't shed light on what's going on, and you can do much. Again, it used to be you see sessions and bounce rate. Today you can see user journeys, you can see movements, you can even track the screen and get statistics. It's crazy what you can get today. Why not? It just gives you a more 3D kind of image of what's going on and who that person that goes into your shop is.
Yeah, and it's maybe this is a good point to sort of finish this conversation right here. But for the audience, one thing that I want to say is that we do a lot that helps marketers, again, on top of all their paid measurement, and it's all available for anyone to try for free, and just to see how it will help you organize all that data that's available for you. And we're going to be focusing a lot more on this as we move forward. It's just, we notice it when we talk to clients, just how critical it is right now for brands of all sizes. Really.
I think the nicest thing is to share knowledge, and it's very important, especially in our field, and we love to do it, and we should continue.
Yeah, we will. So thanks, Omri, for walking us through it.
Sure, and always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for joining, and we'll catch you in our next live videos, next podcast episodes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.